Hey, I'm Zach Rash. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Coco. There you can see is one of our devices. Oh, thank you for inviting me up to speak. So I saw robot delivery for the first time. I heard about this for the first time when I was, I think, a freshman in high school. And I remember distinctly hearing about this and thinking, this is a much more optimistic version of the future of delivery. There are millions of deliveries that happen in Los Angeles every week that take place within a couple miles. So you have these idling gas-powered cars that are driving a mile away, circling back to the restaurant, and they're doing this millions of times a week just in Los Angeles. And so I remember distinctly seeing this and thinking, this is a much more optimistic version of the future of delivery. This is going to continue to grow. These are lightweight electric vehicles, and this makes much more sense. And the problem was a lot of these companies were focusing heavily on research and development. They're focusing on making these fully autonomous and working on these deep technologies. And so this has been going on for almost a decade now. And so we said, can we deploy these and actually make an impact on businesses and communities today using remote drivers? So we basically have a delivery driver who's working remotely from their computer at home, driving these. We have someone backstage driving this right now. And this allows us to be introduced into our communities and working with merchants. So we work with restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, all types of local businesses to deliver to their customers at a lower cost and a lot better consistency and quality than other delivery options today. And ultimately to the community, this provides a much cleaner and more efficient way of doing delivery. And I think this is the kind of future we want to build towards. So right now we're working with merchants all across Los Angeles, and we're super excited to be expanding to Miami at the beginning of next year with the support of Mayor Suarez. And we look forward to working with him and his team, and we appreciate all of his support in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach. It's amazing. Also, again, when we launched CoMotion in 2017, some of the first exhibitors that we had, some of the earliest believers in this, were some of the urban robotics companies pointing the way about how this would eventually be deployed. So it's great, again, to see some of those early innovators, groups like Gita coming out of Piaggio Fast Forward and Starship and others, and now to have, seeing Coco actually get deployed is fantastic and part of the realization of the vision that we've always had. With that, now it's my pleasure to introduce our first sort of plenary session of the day here on human-centered mobility, the who of complete streets, how to center the people in our streets as the mobility revolution happens. And so with that, it's my delight to introduce our moderator, Eli Akira Kaufman, who will lead this discussion. So Eli, the floor is yours. There you go.
I'm just going to welcome up my co-panelists. So I see Jessica, Quemuel, I saw earlier, Sarah, hi Paty, and just find yourself a seat. Really exciting to be here. Quemuel was here a minute ago. Okay. So we'll wait for Quemuel, but I guess, are we doing mask on, mask off? Mask off? Okay. Off, okay. I guess before we dive in, I just want to, because this is all about the who of mobility, I want to acknowledge the fact that we are on the lands of the Tongva, the Chumash, the Tatapian, and the San Gabrielino native peoples. So they're part of the who as well. So I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that before we begin. This is going to be a free-flowing conversation. We had a meeting last week to just start to develop our questions, our prompts, and kind of get together on what we want to discuss in terms of the who. So we're gonna do a pretty open, free-flowing conversation. We were given 5 minutes to do some sort of Q&A, but we agreed that that was a little bit short to do anything meaningful. So what we'd like to do is invite you to reach out to us either collectively or individually to Quemuel, or individually to with your follow-up questions, since 5 minutes is just not going to be enough time, we don't think. So I think that's all the housekeeping I have. I'm going to just start by introducing myself, and then we agreed that we'd introduce ourselves and our organizations and our affiliations. So I'll just start off. I'm Eli Akira Kaufman, like I said. I'm the executive director of the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. We've been around for a little over 20 years, advocating for safer, healthier, more sustainable and equitable streets for everyone. Our theory of change is that the more bikeable LA is, the more livable it is, the better the quality of life for everyone. So our motto is be able to ride a bike everywhere, anytime, and anyone as well. So it's everyone, everywhere, every time, or anytime. And we do this through a series of different types of education programs. We do policy advocacy work. We're going to be speaking, here's the shameless plug. We're going to be speaking and presenting at a workshop, I think in session or room 2 across the street on our a project that we have encouraging e-bikes with LADWP, also with SCAG, Go Human. We have a program to help senior neighbors get on e-bikes and see how that increases their mobility options. So if you're interested in learning more about our work, it's called Shrink the Sprawl. I'm getting some feedback, Shrink the Sprawl. And we'll be starting at 10:30 after this session. So hope to see some of you there. So that's it for me. And again, we're going to introduce ourselves. So I'll start up with Quemuel. And if you could just sort of share your affiliation, your organization, and then we're answering a question, which is, why is the who of complete streets really important? Why is the who so important for us to consider as we begin this conversation? So thanks for kicking us off.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning. It is truly a pleasure to be sharing this space with you all. Quemuel Arroyo here from New York City, where I have the honor of serving as the first ever Chief Accessibility Officer for the MTA. You might have heard of us. We're the largest transit agency in North America, moving around 6 million people a day prior to the pandemic. Now, in the 4 million, 4.5 a day. So we're getting back. New York is open. So please do come visit and ride the public transportation system. My mission and my team's vision is that no New Yorker should not have access to all the fun, the job opportunities and treasures that the city has to offer. And for New York to come back, for New York to continue to move, we need a transit system, a public transportation system that allows every New Yorker, every tourist visitor, the opportunity to move around on their own time independently so that we can get to a school, to work, to the hospitals, to see our doctors, or to a bar at the end of the day. That is my definition of accessibility. And we're doing it by redefining, re-engineering our 107-year-old system. We are well on our way. And I personally work very closely with the city, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. Before this role, I served as the first Chief Accessibility Specialist for the Department of Transportation, where we really worked on the question of redesigning the streetscape for all New Yorkers and understanding that the space that we had created left a lot of people behind. There were marginalized voices that were silenced, not by design, that was never the intent, but it was the outcome. And I'm so excited to be part of this panel because we now see what happens when we leave people behind. We invest hundreds of millions of dollars in paratransit system, in home care, and medical bills that could have been avoided if each individual was given the opportunity to move around their community, move around in place, not have to migrate because of housing, because of poor transportation systems. And these are all societal issues that we've created. And if you read anything about me, look around, you'll hear that I have a big fight with Da Vinci and the Vitruvius Man, because it really doesn't incorporate the birth to death archaeology of our lifespan. And that's what I'm trying to undo, and really undoing this prototype that so many of us build for. Policies, products, goods, and services are for the most part designed for an able-bodied, 6 foot tall, very robust man. And that's my wall that I'm trying to break. And well, yeah, I'm excited to hear what another panelists have to say.
Awesome. I'll go next. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Meaney. I work at Investing in Place here in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles in the late 90s. I grew up in a small little suburb outside of Boston. I'm someone who doesn't like to drive. Never really have been too wild about it. Been in a couple of scary car accidents throughout my life and just have always shied away from driving. And when I moved to LA in the late 90s, I got around on the bus, the bike, and walking. It wasn't until a few years ago, until I got married, that I actually started to have a car. Primarily, my mother-in-law can't drive, and either can my brother-in-law. So having a car for our little unit became really important. like a lot of us, our transportation patterns change when a major life change happens, and we care for others and move or to change jobs. My work over the years has become very centered around transparency and how we spend our public transportation dollars, our tax dollars. Here in Los Angeles County, we've taxed ourselves about 4 times in the past 25 years to improve our transportation investments, but our buses are worse now than they were 20 years ago. And that's pre-COVID buses. So I have a lot of deep questions about where our money is going, for what, for who, and who's at the table deciding this. I spent yesterday morning with our city controller's office, releasing an audit on the poor state of our city sidewalks. It blows my mind that transportation dollars don't go into our sidewalks. When I look at that robot, I'm like, good luck getting around in LA. Maybe now will there be powerful interests that will prioritize sidewalks so we can capitalize on the public space, because we've overlooked it for sure right now. So I focus a lot here in Los Angeles County. My heart lies with inclusive decision-making and really how do people have agency in their own neighborhood on what's possible. The city of Los Angeles is the largest city in the United States without a capital infrastructure plan. Tracking our budget where it goes is very challenging and something I actually enjoy spending a lot of time doing, but trying to move our city to realign where our dollars going. One thing that kind of always blows my mind is here in the city of Los Angeles, the Department of Transportation, led by Seleta Reynolds, we all heard from yesterday, pushes up lists of unfunded needs of projects to Metro, who's our big funder, right? Guess what? The DOT, our Department of Transportation in the city of LA, doesn't manage our bus shelters, doesn't manage our sidewalks, doesn't manage our street trees, doesn't manage our street lights. They just do from curb to curb. So while we have a powerful story about what's happening in Los Angeles due to the amount of billions that are coming into our region, Metro's annual budget is $8 billion. There's still major challenges on who we're designing our transportation for that really motivate me and inspire me to keep doing this work. So pleased to be with you all today and look forward to getting into it.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Jepson, and I'm the planning director at the Southern California Association of Governments. I want to first just thank CoMotion for making time at this panel, at this conference, to really focus on who the technology is aiming to serve. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the stage here with some of our community-based organizations that work within Southern California, because they are the ones that have, their feet on the ground and are working with our communities to really tell that story about what the communities need. So thanks again for having me. So the Southern California Association of Governments, we are the largest metropolitan planning organization in the country. We cover 6 counties and 191 cities. Our board, we are governed by a board of 86 members. I think some of them may be here today. I know they've really enjoyed visiting this conference in the past. Our primary role is to develop a long-range growth vision for the region that aims to align the transportation investments from across our 6 counties with the development that our cities are planning in order that we can achieve our federal Clean Air Act requirements and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the region, as well as achieve a wide range of other social, economic, and environmental goals. We are not an implementing agency, but increasingly we're playing a role in supporting our local agencies in implementing our plan. And we've been very fortunate to be able to, in recent years, not just to be able to support planning for more innovative concepts in our local communities, but also to do some pilot projects and support some new programs. About 10 years ago, which is hard for me to believe, I joined SCAG to start the Active Transportation and Special Programs Department for the agency. And my hiring immediately followed the adoption of our 2012 plan, where we recognized that bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure was really going to be critical to achieving the region's sustainability goals. At that time, one of the primary goals of my position in our work was to really complement the tremendous investment that was happening in transit throughout the region and to make sure that we had those last mile connections to our station areas. But over time, what happened is that really our geographic focus expanded much more broadly, as we recognized in order to have a truly multimodal system, where people can connect seamlessly between modes, we really did need to focus everywhere on walking and biking. So that has been a big focus of my work. One of our strategies in building interest just more broadly across Southern California in walking and biking is that we started a campaign called Go Human. And Go Human is a community outreach and media campaign with the goals of reducing collisions and increasing walking and biking across the region. As the name would suggest, Go Human, one of our main messaging points focused on really humanizing the people who are walking and biking and not making it an us versus them type of a situation. Our artwork is always focused on a series of traffic signs where we replace stick figures with real people, which I think is really important in getting to people to have some more empathy about people on the road. So to your question of who the complete streets are designed for and the way we've done our messaging, complete streets are for everybody, as many have said, and to make sure that we can get about our communities safely. But the other thing that I wanted to focus on in answering your question is, while we want to answer the question of who of complete streets, we also need to look at the who is most impacted by the incomplete streets that we currently have. And just wrapping up, in Southern California, 1,500 people die every year, and about more than 5,000 people are severely injured on our roadways. People think about Southern California and they think those collisions are happening on our highways, but they're not. They're mostly happening on our local streets and roads. We've been doing a lot of work within the region to define a regional high injury network, so that we know, because the collisions aren't evenly dispersed, they're really concentrated in some areas. And by having a greater understanding of where those collisions are occurring, we're looking to be able to better focus our transportation resources.
Thank you. Hi, Lai, thank you so much for the introduction, the land acknowledgement, really appreciate it. So my name is Paty Rios. I'm the Executive Director of New Cities. We are a non-profit organization based in Montreal, Canada, and we are focused on shaping better, inclusive, and healthier cities designed for everyone by everyone. We focus on the areas of housing, transportation, and also resilience / climate change, and with our overarching framework of well-being. So one of the things that I had actually been hearing a lot in this conference is the word empathy is starting to emerge. And I was just reading an article from Francis Frey that empathy is very related to trust, and how we build our cities as we're coming out of this pandemic. Trust is going to be essential. So I appreciate a lot that, as my colleagues are saying, that we have the opportunity to have this panel so that we can understand how the private sector, how the public sector, how community, how academia, how the different people that need to be involved can build that trust in the decision making and save us a lot of time. So a little bit more about New Cities. We believe in the power of meaningful engagement. So we bring the right stakeholders into the table so that we can face those challenges and issues, longstanding challenges that the pandemic has uncovered, so that we can start finding solutions that work for everyone and that prioritize the needs of the ones that have been underserved in the past. A little bit about myself. I'm a huge advocate of sociable housing, complete neighborhoods, and transportation, safe streets specifically, because 8 years ago, I actually had an accident. I was training for a marathon. I didn't see a metal box. I was wearing a cap and I hit my head. This led to 3-year temporary disability, in which in the next few months, I started having seizures, and this got me into bed, and I wasn't able to be out of bed for more than 3 hours. I was living in a neighborhood that was mainly residential, and it was delimited by arterials. So because I didn't have the physical ability to actually move up walk more than 300 meters, I couldn't get absolutely anywhere. Streets were safe, the sidewalks were wide, it was an amazing green canopy, but I couldn't get anywhere. So the question that I mean, at that point, I didn't realize, but right now, this is kind of like a blessing in disguise, because right now that I go back and realize that after I had the accident and started experiencing this, we moved into a mixed-use neighborhood. So it was a mixed-use neighborhood, and actually housing in which we experienced co-living with other people, because I wasn't able to be alone because of the seizures, that my whole world was transformed about how we design the cities. So that's why I'm a passionate advocate. I believe that the power of inclusive and complete neighborhoods actually goes above complete streets. And if we don't prioritize that, then we're trying to solve with band-aids the issues that that the city has and the issues that the most vulnerable communities have. Something that to answer a little bit more to your question, I think it's about the who, but it's also about the how. How do we bring people together? And Quemuel, that you were mentioning, this is not by design that some people are underrepresented in the processes, but how do we ensure that we are actually bringing the right voices into the conversation? And it has to do a lot with the people that most need to participate in public consultations, in roundtables. They probably have 2 jobs. They probably have, they are caregivers and they cannot participate in in-person events. How are we facilitating this? Do we have like an option to pay for instance, for transit tickets, or do we have daycares so that more women actually can be present in the decision-making table? So for me, it's about the how. How do you get into the communities, into the neighborhoods, into those gatekeepers that are actually going to enable their community to tell what their need, what is the priority, and then how we create that piece of empathy, going back to the word empathy, that is going to be essential so that we can build trusting relationships and know that we are going to be headed to the same place.
Okay, wow. So you see, we have a powerhouse panel here, from accessibility for all, especially our most vulnerable populations, from transparent budgeting and planning and making sure the right people are on the table, to empathy and trust and how we build that. And also how governmental agencies can actually get closer to the grassroots that with the community-based organizations that are doing the work on the ground. You got a lot of brain power up here. And I'm going to sort of add in some little contextual things here and there. If you are concerned and if you're coming from afar and you want to see the local movement, actually this Saturday, the 20th, is going to be World Remembrance Day. We're going to have a march at the St. Augustine Baptist Church in Inglewood. And if you want to find out more about that, you can come up to me afterwards. There's not so many of you that I can give you the information about it, but you'll be able to see the on the ground movement that is cultivating and building here in Los Angeles. So the next question's a really great sort of follow up to what Paty was talking about. The question is that how can we have complete streets without complete neighborhoods? Right? Like this whole concept that we have these bike lanes to nowhere, or we have these sidewalks that sort of dead end or don't have any kind of coherent interconnectivity, that we have communities that lack affordable housing, lack access to dignified medical care, lack access to good education opportunities and dignified work. How do we have complete streets? How can we actually have complete streets without complete neighborhoods? And I would just ask that whoever wants to jump in, let's do that. Yeah. We talked about it together ahead of time. So can we have complete streets without complete neighborhoods is maybe a better place to start.
I think Paty just really illustrated that too, of the value of having things you need in an accessible distance. No, I don't think we can. And I don't mean to be the total Debbie Downer on this panel, but I really worry about where we're at in Los Angeles. If you've had a chance to walk around, you can see we're in the midst of heartbreakingly devastating housing crisis. And I think for me, I sit in this space in the field and transportation right now with the mainstream media coverage or the powerful press releases we see from agencies and elected officials with the reality of what the data is showing, and around access, around safety, around health. So I think I'm concerned about the field, and I feel like we're actually going in the wrong direction. And I absolutely want to live myself, and I want my family to be able to live in a complete neighborhood.
I also agree that no, there's definitely not one without the other. The reason being, it doesn't work if you don't have people who feel that they have agency, that they have power, really what we used to call skin in the game. And without that, people aren't going to be invested. We have people who are very much invested in their lot, in their private housing, but where that ends, their engagement ends. And so we cannot have a community, a fabric of people who feel like they have skin in the game in what happens on the streets. skin in the game, and what happens at their intersections with their community, with folks outside of their property line. And really, we could use this as an analogy to everything. Can you have a good world without socially conscious companies? No. We need good neighbors. And what does that mean? So I'll give an example. In New York City, when we were doing shared streets and really creating plazas in local neighborhoods, we needed local community members, individuals, residents, and organizations to come together to define the space, take ownership of it, to clean it, to activate it. And it happens best when you have people involved, people who say, this is my community. I will tell you the definition of this space. I will tell you who we are, and we will activate it for those of us who live and sleep and eat and work here. So without that level of engagement, no.
I would just add that, I think focusing on complete streets is a great way to start to build a more complete community. We're in a very urban area right now in downtown Los Angeles, but we serve, 6 counties that spanning from rural, suburban, to very urban. And with our Go Human campaign and our Go Human events, we've been able to successfully, do those events and those engagements throughout the region. Because people do want, no matter where they are, no matter how dense things are, they want to start creating kind of central core destinations for people to gather and to create great public spaces. So I think that as we do more to look at the roadways and how we make them more accommodating, it starts to put the backbone in place to create these more complete streets, complete communities that everybody really wants to live in, where people can, that bring people together.
Just quickly to add to that, I feel like there's one piece of the conversation if we start exploring also from the behavioral economics perspective and also neuroscience of how actually we move throughout the city and in our neighborhoods. If we have a better understanding of what motivates people to be moving around in a neighborhood, we're going to be able to build this complete neighborhoods in a way that encourages people, that we are not just saying step out of the car, but we are actually encouraging people to walk, to bike, to be active. So from that sense, there was the sociologist Kevin Lynch, and he probably some of you are familiar with the book, The Image of the City. He made this experiment about saying there's a row of ants that are going from point A to from point B to get food, and then he places a brick in the middle of the line of the ants where they are going, and it's not symmetrical. It's a little bit more tilted to one side, and then the ants momentarily they try to find their way and they are all around the place, but eventually they find that the shortest pathway, that's the one that they're going to start taking. And this is a very basic kind of reflection on actually what people do. Sometimes if we understand that, if we observe the built environment and we start understanding how the desired lines, for instance, tell us so much more about what are our patterns, then we're going to be able to build complete neighborhoods. There's research that shows that people are more likely to walk up to 800 meters in an active edge than 200 meters in a parking lot. So what are we doing to make these active edges? And I was just in the morning, this morning in downtown, and there was the same building with 2 facades. One facade was complete concrete, and it was probably 150 meters that you needed to walk. And the other one had amazing murals that represented the identity of LA. So it's this kind of decisions that if we get into the grain, and I'm wearing my architect hat at this point, if we get to the details about the design and how we encourage people, instead of saying no, we shouldn't be pursuing this, it's how do we put on the positive lens on this is what's going to make us healthier? We know that this data is telling us that you're likely to be 30% chances of being overweight in a complete neighborhood. Your chances of being overweight in a suburban neighborhood is 65%. So it's so different from what it was 10 years ago, but we're seeing this kinds of statistics. It's more likely if you live in suburbia, you are more likely to get a divorce as well. If you live in suburbia, you're more likely to suffer a heart attack. You're less likely to recover from cancer. So all of this investment is not just to actually keep us away from, from spending more in public transportation or maybe in cars. I'm going to use the example of cars. if we start analyzing the data and find what is the correlation in between the people who have more access to complete neighborhoods and safe streets and their health, we might be able to make the business case to say this actually reduces the amount of the money that we're spending from the health service. And I know that the US has a big conversation about as well of the health service, not the same in Canada. But these kind of comparisons are the one that might be able to build the business case beyond the fact that we are talking about basic human rights.
So how do we, so it makes me think about like the order of things, right? So the complete streets that we experience are very incomplete. They're sort of these islands, these moments, but they're not continuous. They're not holistic in terms of their execution. What's the order of things? How do we actually, because right now it seems to me that the complete streets programs that we see are somewhat pop-up. They're temporary at best. And they sort of are like a kind of a short-term outcome. But upstream of that, what needs to happen to actually operationalize and make sure that these complete streets and complete neighborhoods can happen? What needs to happen? What do cities, and we talked about this in our pregame, like what do cities need to learn or figure out to actually make these less like pop-up temporary installations and more like the norm? Quemuel, yeah.
So Paty, you started talking to us about, the reason for doing things, with empathy. So we've spoken about the what, we've spoken about the how a little bit, the where we know, but the why is the most important question here. And I think that's where this question leads us. Why do we need to do this? Why should we, design in a human-centric fashion? Why should we have empathy? And honestly, at the risk of sounding a little facetious, Paty, I think the why for me, understanding that people don't understand empathy unless they are facing with it personally, like you, like me, so knowing that empathy, that why won't come unless you're dealing with it, I go to the reason that, it's the law in many places and many of these conversations. And that gets us but so far. The real answer here is the lost opportunity, really the lost value, the lost in revenue. And that's where I come back to, you are leaving money behind at the table when you don't design for that birth to death experience. I used to be the interim president at a startup company that designed e-scooter docking stations that were agnostic. And I became president because I brought that tension to the dialogue who nobody else is still talking about, which is I have not been invited to the conversation of scooters and micromobility at large. And whatever, that's a different topic, but it shouldn't come at the expense of my pedestrian experience. And there is a world out there where these things could work can have some synergy. They could be in symbiotic because it's not a zero sum. There's plenty of space out there for us all to play. But the why that hits home to me when I speak to my partners, my friends in the private sector, is you're leaving money behind when you're not designing for all people in our society, in our community. We look at biking, City Bike or these big companies around the world. It's always the middle-aged white male that makes six figures or above who are using these devices because they're bullish enough to take on the road. They're bullish enough to go on an unprotected lane. And they're missing that synergy with government saying, okay, how can we add more players to that ecosystem? And the answer is design more safe streets, design more protected bike lanes. And then we go, okay, well, how do we get to other community members who aren't there, like the Black and brown community, the low income community? But governments can make subsidies to allow those people to join the conversation and tell them about all the benefits that come beyond green, health, and alternate modes of transit. That why that works the best for me is the loss of revenue that you're not benefiting from when you're not designing holistically.
Anyone else want to comment on like the order of things, what needs to happen to make these less temporary, more permanent, more the norm?
Well, I just want to discount what you brought up with the pop-up events and the building of the community support. I mean, I think, I work with 191 cities and the decisions that are made there by the elected officials, they really want to listen and hear from their communities and respond to what they want. When there is resistance to new projects, they get shut down like that. So it doesn't matter how much money is out there. If the community is not saying, I want this, then the elected officials aren't going to chase the money and the projects aren't going to move forward. So I think, really building that base of community support is important. And what we're finding is that we don't have to hire a bunch of consultants to go out and design the community, to tell the community what is important, right? They're, as was said, they're very much aware of what the needs are. They recognize that this is the route I want to take. These are the places I visit, and these are the barriers that are currently in place in order for me to get to those places. So what we were kind of forced to learn during the pandemic, I think, or more, it was reinforced, is really the role of community-based organizations in building that broad community support. So what we did is that our model for Go Human was hosting these big events, right, and bring everybody together. And we couldn't do that in the pandemic because obviously it violated all the public health laws. So instead of taking our grant money and giving it to cities that were supporting to the consultants and planning these big events, we distributed the money through a series of mini grants. So we gave a lot of money to community-based organizations for them to promote transportation safety however they felt was going to be most powerful. And in the pandemic, that meant making it feel safe to ride transit. It meant, building out spaces, public spaces, and slowing streets, again, to address their immediate needs. And I think having the community come together, really define their needs, it creates a good opportunity to bring the resources in to serve the community.
Thanks. Anyone else on this one, or?
Oh yeah, you've heard me talk a lot about it. For me, it's about transparency though, and just money. So for the city of Los Angeles, they get about 800 to 900 million a year from our transportation sales taxes that our Mayor Eric Garcetti and our 15 council program. Where that money is going and are we prioritizing it with the vision in mind, I think is a good place to start. For instance, we're just kind of in the city is just getting ready to do a new bus shelter program that's really largely focused on digital advertising. And I think, how do we switch the conversation to be, what's the outcome we want? How many bus shelters do we want a year? What kind of coverage? You could do that with street trees. You could do that with bus only lanes. You could do that with a whole host of things. But we have a few gatekeepers of power who know and control where the money's going. And I think that sets everyone else up for frustration and a real lack of an outcome kind of process of what kind of city we want. So I think that would be a great place to start. Yeah.
I just want to go back to a little bit to what Quemuel was saying about the why. For me, the why is on the well-being and the health piece. And sometimes solving, we are so focused on just being more efficient, just being more comfortable, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're improving our life quality. So in that sense, it's why we're doing these things, because this is the future. This is the future that we are building. These are the cities that we want to leave to our children. This is the cities that are going to be more resilient. We're trying to build community. And this piece about creating stewardship and allowing the community to actually take their own decisions, it doesn't just work for infrastructure or to make decisions about how we want to design the city. It actually takes a ton of weight off from the government whenever something happens in terms of a natural disaster. The community is the first one to actually react whenever they are connected. There was something that happened in Mexico City I don't know if you were familiar with the 2017 earthquake. So the communities that were the complete neighborhoods where there was access to bicycles and a bunch of neighborhood stores in the corners, and there was great density. It was a community before the government reacted that they got organized so that they could be finding the people that might be trapped in their buildings, because they knew each other and they knew where the seniors were, a person with a mobility impairment that they needed help. Otherwise, in the suburban areas of Mexico City, it took them more than 12 hours to actually activate themselves and to get help, just because the community was not so neat. So we are seeing that these things are going to start happening. We are trying to do everything that we can to mitigate the effects of climate change, but at the same time, we need to be prepared, not just from the top bottom, but bottom up approach, knowing that we have agency, that we can react to these things. And what a better way to start by actually empowering the community to make decisions about their own neighborhood. When you have a kid, you actually teach them like how to use money. I remember having like my allowance, and like if you waste your $5 on the Sunday on ice cream, then that's gonna be for it. But it's the same with the community. We need to understand as a collective how we spend those resources and our time together and prioritize what is needed for the collective, not individually. So this is an exercise that doesn't need to be just when there's a project going on, but it's an ongoing participatory engagement exercise that is going to allow private sector, public sector to make better decisions in shorter amount of time.
That's kind of a perfect segue to what Quemuel sent us his question, which is how do we ensure that we have the right true representation in these discussions? How do we create the forum, or how do we facilitate making sure that we have the right people around these tables? So that maybe the pressure doesn't just lie on the shoulders of CBOs to do all that public engagement and get out there with their limited resources to do what they need to do. How do we create the context for those meaningful conversations that are truly inclusive, so that we can come up with these great strategies that are going to make our cities more livable? So Quemuel, you want to kick us off on that one?
So I use this barometer of healthy tension and healthy conflict. Everyone in this room is overeducated. And given any question, I'm sure that we can think of a great answer and a great solution, each and every one of us. That's a problem, because we usually don't have the best answers, because we all live through our lived experience. We're nothing but a summation of our experiences and backgrounds and surroundings. That means that we have blind spots. We don't have the best answer. We don't have the solution, because, my old boss, Paty would always say, the best solutions come from within the community. Like you just said, they know what they need. We don't have the answers. So without that healthy tension, we're missing the mark. We need to, get our bearings straight. And the only way that we'll get there is by having that healthy conflict, that healthy tension is what I know ensures I have, the full dialogue. The table is set and complete when there's tension at the table. Without it, they're missing voices.
So it's like we need to be more courageous about not being in these echo chambers that just sort of validate and revalidate our points of view. You feel like these tension conversations you're talking about is really a safe place for disagreement and an opportunity for people to challenge assumptions and just go at it in a more almost confrontational way? Or can you break it down a little bit more?
So I wouldn't say confrontation. I go back to saying healthy tension. Like, let's not shy away from the resistance. Let's not shy away from the other, because we're going to continue to miss the mark if we continue to silence whatever voice that is, whatever group that is. So let's lean into that tension and see, how can we come to a healthy balance? Paty, we're having this conversation here, you and I struggle because, having been in the private sector and public sector, I understand how difficult it is, because what we're juggling is return to our stakeholders, return to our investors, so being profit is real. Let's not sugarcoat it. We need profit. And we also need to design a world where we are moving forward as a collective, where we're more civically engaged. And I think that's the power of government. Government is the one that has to say, sure, you can come play and you can test out your innovative, new, cool toys and ideas, but not at the expense of our people. And we need to do it in a way that there is synergy and we can all move forward together without anyone being jeopardized. And there is a happy medium there, where private companies can be profitable if government trusts them that they've set the parameters for safety and efficiency and no harm to the community. And government does have to give up this idea that they get to be innovative. They don't. They get to ask for innovation and they get to set the stage for innovation to come. And we need to let all the billions of dollars in this room to be innovative, to be creative, to deliver solutions that government needs and want to see real.
And I feel like in that vein is for the government's responsibility to actually create an agenda. I mean, the market is going to do its thing, but the government's responsibility is to set the agenda of where we're going in terms of well-being and what we want to accomplish and what is good for citizens, so that the private sector can also jump into that agenda. And I mean, the private sector has absolutely no problem in terms of coming up with creative solutions that are actually trying to address all of the issues. But I feel that this first responsibility about creating the vision of how do we want to, what the local, and I'm talking about local communities because it's not going to be the same vision across the city, what the local communities, neighborhoods are going to want. It's up to the government to actually hold tight to that piece so that they can make accountable all of the investors, non-for-profits as well. Like, how are you supporting your community? So in that sense, I feel like this piece about like, how do you bring people together? It's, you got to know that it requires time. Building empathy and doing the equity work requires time. It's about building trust. It's about being your bringing your authentic self. It's about building the safe space so that you can participate. And it's not going to happen from overnight. You need to be having conversations with the community. The community needs to be comfortable with conflict, as you're saying, because conflict is a good thing, actually. It's through conflict that we grow and we become better persons. So just embracing that and knowing that after that, I had this professor that used to say, there's not going to be perfect solutions for one sector. There are going to be holistic solutions that are good enough for all of the sectors. And I truly believe in that.
Okay, this sort of is, and again, a nice segue to the next question that we developed. So how do we encourage or demand the private sector actually to show up as good faith and good faith? There's a lot of private sector, a lot of startups here. How do we, what do cities need to do? What a community need to do to encourage more than just bottom line sort of thinking in terms of like, you know, one of the things that we see in this culture is this need for speed to get there first, to get there biggest, fastest. And it doesn't really think about the larger, greater good that we're trying to create here at places like CoMotion. So what can we do to encourage the private sector to come to the table thinking, how can we encourage that sort of longer view that's going to allow some of these things that we're talking about to take place? Any ideas about how we can gently encourage or demand that?
I'm smiling over here because I always go back to this money's, point. Sorry, I used to work in banking. I can't help it. But for my constituency, my community, there's over 57 million Americans with disabilities in this nation, 1 billion in the world. And we're not all that broke. We ain't that broke. My money's green just as everybody else's, but I won't participate in spaces and products and ecosystems where I don't feel welcome, where I don't have a ramp, be it physical, a digital ramp, access to the conversation. And that doesn't mean an invitation because that's not good enough. Don't invite me to the party if your dance floor is not accessible. Allow me the opportunity to get down just like everybody else is. That's where I'm going to spend my money. And by the way, worldwide, it's $1 trillion market. And again, you're leaving that money behind because you're going at it alone. And we've all heard the quote, if you want to go fast, go at it alone. If you want to go far, go at it together. So you're missing money by not being inclusive.
Anyone else want to add to that? I think actually we did a pretty good job. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything here. Oh, we had the other question. I asked the panel when we met last week if they saw a recent piece of news that either is encouraging and validating of like, okay, we're heading in the right direction, or a reminder of how much further we have to go. So I invited the panel to kind of rip something from the headlines to share today about how we're doing in terms of creating inclusive, complete neighborhoods and streets. And just as like a quick news flash, how are we doing in LA? And if you're going to give us a more global perspective, we'd love that as well. And maybe we'll start on this end and start with you, Paty. Is there a news item that just gives you hope or gives you pause in terms of how things are trending right now?
I think that there's both. I'm going to go with the hope one. So we recently the same mayor was reelected in Montreal, Valérie Plante, and the top of her efforts are going to be on housing, on transportation, and on life quality. And it's just refreshing. And these have been the efforts that she has been trying to build upon for the last 4 years. And now she's going to be trying to build on those a lot again. And it's just very refreshing to see that there's a possibility of actually having a continuity, a sustainability in terms of the projects, and that the community is getting more involved. In the last, I've been just, I actually am new to New Cities. I just joined 2 months ago. So I'm in my probably 60 day, but I've been reviewing what's happening with Montreal in terms of housing. That's a topic that it's a passion for me. And there, they don't have, of course, like usually I compare like Vancouver, where I'm based, Montreal, and then I'm coming from Mexico City. So I like comparing and contrasting what's happening in the different countries. And we are all facing a housing affordability crisis. We are all trying to see how we can build more housing for people. And one of the easy solutions is going into the outskirts of the city and generating more sprawl that it's also not conducive to addressing the climate change action. And also in terms of Canada, there's a big responsibility in terms of the approach to truth and reconciliation with First Nations. And just getting into the sprawl piece is getting more territory from what has been already taken from First Nations. So there's a lot of pieces that actually overlap. And I think that the best news that I've been hearing is we need to, and this is happening across Canada, it's happening across the US as well. We need to be building more complete neighborhoods, because it's not transportation that is going to solve the fact that your work is in one extreme of the city and then your housing is in the other one. But it's about having work, an opportunity for a job, housing, recreational opportunities, care, daycare in the same neighborhood that you have, so that maybe it's not about first trying to address, I mean, I'm a pro addressing chain trips because I'm a woman, I experience those things. But what if we go to the root, to the cause, and try to understand that maybe if we have all of those things in the same neighborhood, it's more about the last mile and how we connect within the last mile, instead of trying to put much more resources into the big transportation systems that they're going to be needed, of course. But there's things that can be solved from different disciplines. So I guess, like, just to wrap up this idea, it's important that we don't work in silos. And I would love to see in CoMotion at some point that we're also bringing together, we're working with urban planners, with housing, with public spaces, so that we can see how we articulate transportation around all of these things. And we can start seeing whose responsibility is to be making some changes. And then we can articulate as well budgets. And so move away from the siloed conversation. I think that that's happening. I'm seeing news that are trying to move away from the siloed conversation. It's more easy to be said than to be done, but that's what's gonna get us to a better city.
That whole concept of intersectionality, something we discuss a lot in our groups here in Los Angeles, and the fact that we can no longer just live in these silos and expect to have impact and progress. So appreciate that. Do you have a piece of news, either something that's encouraging or something that's like, oh man, we got so much further to go?
Yeah, no, so there were dozens of articles this week on the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So I think that's something that I'm very hopeful about. And a lot of the programs that are receiving funding are different than what they've been in the past. There's, significant investment in our transportation alternatives program, which is what we use to fund active transportation. There's, more climate related bills. There's some Vision Zero opportunities. And one that we were particularly excited about is a new pilot program that's called Reconnecting Communities, and looking at ways transportation and infrastructure in the past has separated communities. But how do we rethink that infrastructure to bring communities back together? So I think the government plays an important role in this conversation. And we need the resources in order to be able to work with communities to rebuild them in a way that creates that quality of life for everyone. So I think that infrastructure bill really has a lot of great opportunities, and I hope we all take advantage of them.
I think there are some really amazing journalists here in Los Angeles that blow my mind. And the LA Times, like Ben Poston, I think Oreskes, they've been crushing it. But article after article in the past week or so, they did a huge extensive look at the impact and destruction of freeways, highways, particularly in Black and brown communities with like so much data. And then they did it again with who gets pulled over riding their bike in Los Angeles. But one thing that I keep going back to, especially as I look at this, the who of complete streets, is the labor movement and workers and people not working for shitty wages. Does anyone have any idea of what the starting wage for a Metro bus operator is? Yeah, $17.75 part-time hours. One of the key reasons we have so many ghost buses in Los Angeles and we are far below our pre-COVID bus service is they have a shortage of operators. And the audacity to expect people to drive these important buses for $17.75 an hour is something that I've just begun to learn through a lot of news coming out about labor shortages, bus operators. And I think that gives me hope of actually becoming a better advocate, because I think the who of complete streets is also the people who are getting us everywhere. You know, like I feel ignorant that I have been so unaware of the conditions for our bus drivers in one of the most wealthy transportation agencies. So that actually gives me hope, because knowledge is power, and I didn't know that before.
So the headline would be, and so many articles came out in New York on it, but public engagement is off the charts. And it's a lesson that we all learned during COVID. And I always used to use TFL as my gold standard for what public engagement should look like. And over at Transit for London, they have a city ordinance that requires the public to engage with them to pass anything different, anything new. And they get it. They achieve that because engagement over there does not require a 5 o'clock meeting at a governmental building on a Wednesday evening. Engagement over there is online, is on a phone. It's whenever you have time to opt in. So it's really a holistic approach to community engagement, to outreach. And that had brought out so many voices that were never at the table. We saw that in New York during COVID, where the physical barrier of having to come to a community room, to a DOT meeting room, was taken away because of the public health crisis. And we saw so many new voices join the dialogue. So many silenced, marginalized communities were able to be participants in the change that were being proposed or coming, or the questions that were being asked of what's missing. And that's a lesson that brings me so much hope. It's something that I remind my staff every day of. And really, I will not let us forget how many people we added to the conversation when we took down these barriers of physical access. And we debunked this idea that the aging community, the disability community, special interest, non-English speakers didn't have access to any other conversation that wasn't a physical room. Like, we do have internet out there. People are using smartphones. The aging communities are, people with disabilities are using smartphones. So engagement has taken a new face, and we should never go back to what we had.
Awesome. So we actually timed this pretty well, where we have 9 minutes left. I think we've gotten through the questions that we developed together. So there is time for Q&A after all. So I want to open it up and see if anyone has a question of our esteemed panel. I'll just say the good news for me is just being inspired by all of you and the work that you're doing and the thoughtfulness of our pregame. And again, today, I think it really is going to require the best thinking and collaborative thinking and transparent thinking and courage that we've discussed today to really be that inclusive community that does invite all voices and demands that we listen. So I just want to thank the panel on behalf of CoMotion LA for showing up and having this conversation. And with the last 8 minutes, I want to see if there are any questions, and it's really hard to see. So I don't know if there's someone who can, right there in the third row, I guess.
Thanks for this panel. I'm really enjoying it. I'm wondering about the quality of leadership and how that fits into your idea of how we move into this discussion, because we've seen in our own personal and our own national history that you have the wrong leadership, you don't get things done. And so, what are your thoughts about politics and all this? Who are public leaders and how they affect who on the streets?
So just to make sure that people can hear, the question is, the politics of it. What does our leadership look like? And is it, I guess, doing the job it's meant to do to make sure that we are addressing these questions? And so does anyone want to take that? Yeah.
I absolutely love that question. Thank you so much. Leadership has to reflect the community it serves. That's the only way it works. And then in order for that to happen, we need to lean into and really embrace our difference and our diversity and understand that that is our biggest asset, because that ensures diversity of voice, of thought, and experiences. To me, as a person with a disability, you rarely ever see someone with a disability at the boardroom, at leadership. And the result of that is, products that aren't complete, products that aren't being sold to everyone that's out there. So, and the same could be said, people with disabilities are the second largest overeducated, underemployed demographics in America, second to African-American women. So there's a narrative there about people who are prepared, that can deliver the work. But unfortunately, I used to be an HR professional. We more than often hire people that look and think like us because it's comfortable. So we really need to push ourselves to be diverse and to bring in different voices to complete that service, that product, that narrative that we want to give out there.
Just gonna.
Can I add in a little thought? Yeah. Well, first off, Q, how many jobs have you had, right? So we got HR professional, banking staff. I don't know, because Paty, what you were saying earlier about government, I'm almost on the flip side. I think the leadership in Los Angeles, following the news and the FBI investigations, were in trouble. I actually think the power comes from outside government. I think government's always so late to the game. So I think there's an opportunity with the private sector, community power building. That could be so awesome. There's this whole mess going on in South Los Angeles around this mall that it feels like such a missed opportunity for community-led solutions. And so I'm almost like, our public agent, when you say they should reflect who they serve, none of our Metro board members ride the bus or the train. So like I continue to look to the powerful civic engagement leaders outside our elected offices in Los Angeles that I'm the most inspired from and are actually writing the policy and doing the work. And how does the private sector meet them there? Because the government is like the last one to show up, I feel like, at these issues. So I'm almost a little different than what Paty was saying. But also, like, what a career you've had.
I see someone's waving a folder in the way back, so I'm gonna. Yeah, go ahead.
Understanding that we have a housing crisis, an affordable housing crisis, and that land use planning really defines our streets. What's happening in LA now is, and in California, the land use policies are being made on in response to crisis situations. And we're finding that communities are being disadvantaged because planning is being done by right more than ever. So we may have established that in our neighborhood, that it's a pedestrian oriented district, and that governs where it's defined government in the past for over a decade. What could be done on the street level? Now with the housing crisis, we're finding that developers can come in and build whatever they want, and mostly housing on ground floor pedestrian walkable streets. So what we're finding is that we have no voice in and it doesn't matter whether we're neighborhood counselor or community group. The law now says if you do this, you get 10% going to the house, you can get all of these benefits. You don't have to pay attention to that community. So we're seeing a needed emphasis on housing, but it's a complete detriment of a complete or even having jobs near transit. We are in housing near transit areas. So I'm wondering what your advice is and how to counter this boomerang policy making environment that we're in. Because those of us who worked a long time to create have no voice now. We can't in some case get a better project and talk about even putting in a charger in a building as a better initiative. In exchange for time and this is a huge
Yeah, that's a big one. And so this reactive policy making that's sort of dictating what's going in. So do you have any thoughts about how to address that?
Well, I would just agree that there's a lot of change right now and new policies being put in place to catalyze more housing development. There is a lot of concern. I mean, we work with the local governments. There is a lot of concern about local control being taken away. And that the local control allows for the local planning to make sure that we're, again, designing communities in a way where the housing fits well with the transportation system. The piece of the problem that we work on is we're in charge of looking at the housing need across Southern California and determining how many units of housing should be planned for in each of our cities. And then the arena, exactly. And then the cities are all in the process of updating their housing elements. Now, those housing elements are really the place and the vehicle where, because they connect with the general plans, or we should be looking at how all these things come together. So engagement in that process is really important right now, and a place to raise concerns. Again, you are raising an issue that local governments don't have as much authority as they have historically had. But continuing to be there, being part of the conversation, raising these issues, I think this is just a really critical learning time for everybody. And we're just got to try to figure out how to get it right. But I agree, there's a lot of different competing things coming in right now, and it's really a challenge for cities.
Okay, we're at 40 seconds, so we really only have time for one more question. I apologize. And I'm seeing two gentlemen, but I'm going to just go here. Go ahead.
I'd love to hear a definition for complete streets. I think I got it, but I'm not sure.
Does anyone want to take a stab at a quick? Patty, you want to give us as someone who's been?
Sure. I think my definition of complete streets might be actually enhanced by things that we're learning today, but it's wide sidewalks. We know that and something to be enhanced is the fact that we are discovering through research that women feel much more safe when there's a distance of 1.5 meters into the end of the sidewalk, and men feel more comfortable when it's just 7 centimeters. So it's just like a matter of also trying to understand having a gender lens into designing the sidewalk. So it's the width, it's the opportunity to have canopy, it's active edges as well. It's connecting it so that the pedestrian is not the one that has to go like off the curve, but it actually is connected, is horizontal, is completely smooth, the pathway, that it is smooth to the standards that a person that might have joint problems, fibromyalgia, for instance, or ehlers-danlos, that the smoothness, the level of smoothness is not the same for what we could consider as an able person. Am I missing something else?
I mean, and I think that's a great that's great definition. I think one other way of looking at it is that a complete street is not just a street for cars. That's like another way of defining. It's a street that's actually human-centered, that is accessible by all, no matter what your fitness or your age or your capabilities. It's a street that's designed for more than cars, is another way of looking at it. And then I see that people are still sitting here, but we're at the end of the session. If you need to move to the next thing, go for it. I'm being told that we've got to end. There's that one question at the top. We can maybe do that last question. You're on your phone. Nope. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming out, and come say hi to us if you want to.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation in such depth. But yes, unfortunately, we have to move it along here. So 2 tracks right now. Over at the downtown LA stage is going to be a whole discussion on, there's several workshops starting at 10:30. And then there's also a discussion over on that stage. Sorry, it's like finding through all the notes here. Oh, the intersection of smart and safe. So that's gonna be running over there, looking at basically using technology for safety. That's starting as we speak over the DTLA stage. But I would encourage you to stay here for what will be a discussion on COP26 for sure, beginning with the keynote presentation by Minister Trudy Harrison, who you saw yesterday, who is, of course, the Undersecretary for State at the UK Department of Transport, which will then be followed by a discussion I will lead on basically learning from COP and moving forward on policies there. So please take your seats, and Minister Harrison will begin in just a moment. Thank you.